Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you would like to share your grassroots story, then please be sure to email us at thegrassrootspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you and hopefully get you a scheduled slot. We'd love to hear your story. Alternatively, if you've enjoyed today's show, then we really would appreciate a well-worded 5-star review on whichever platform you've tuned in from. Thank you very much. Catch you in the next one. Hello, welcome back to another episode. So we've got a very exciting episode today. We're joined by Lee Burkhill, aka Garden Ninja, and you might well have seen him on TV's Garden Rescue. So he's got a garden design company over in northwest England, Manchester. And welcome, Lee. Thank you for
Thanks
coming
for having me. It's nice to put my feet up, get myself a Garden Ninja themed brew, and have some time to have a chat.
Well, winter's the perfect time. So we're filming this in January. So you can't get a better month for it really than to put your feet up and, relax. It's a bit of a rat run for the rest of the year. So, So where did your journey start? Where did gardening? Because obviously you're massively passionate. You have a big YouTube channel, and it's what you do for a hobby and your business. But where did it all start? Where did Lee first get into the garden?
Yeah, so gardening is my biggest passion. It's now my business, but way before any of the garden design started, I used to work in IT, but I've always gardened since I was a child. Gardening was kind of like an after-school hidden hobby for me. It's therapy. I absolutely loved it. I loved learning about plants, but it was always kept sort of in the background, quite secret, keep it hush. But it's always been there throughout my life. So as I've worked in different occupations, gardening's always been kind of like the go-to switch off after work. It's something to do that you can switch your brain off a little bit from. There's no judgment there. There's no targets. There's no, bottom line to sort out. So it's always been there as a passion. And then sort of about 2015, I was really struggling in a very busy corporate job. I was gardening more and more and more. And then my husband said to me, you should really think about trying to do this as a job and leave this like corporate project management world behind. Yeah. So that's the very potted version. And then after that, there was a whole lot of night school training, because although I had all this sort of experience, hands-on experience from trial and error from years and years of gardening, there was, I didn't have a piece of paper to say that I knew what I was doing or that I'd horticulture exam. I was very much kind of a learning gardener. So, went away for about 2 years doing part-time courses, doing design part-time, still working full-time, and then started to sort of reduce the full-time working hours, condense them, do a bit more. And then it kind of started to gain traction. And then I won a competition with the BBC and the RHS to do a show garden. And then that for me is like that tipping point where all of a sudden it went from me kind of having a go and enjoying it and it being a bit of a hobby to suddenly becoming a potential career change. And once I'd done that, I think it was about 8 months later, I'd completely left work, and then it was off we go. Probably had about 50% idea of what I wanted to do, and then the rest of it, let's just see what happens. So it was never planned. It wasn't a big master plan of scheduling and work and training. It kind of, the passion was there first, and then the business started. And then it's been the passion that I'd like to think is keeping the business, the content, the engagement going, because it's still as exciting now as it was when I was a child. And when I won that show garden, it's that passion that really drives me. So
that's amazing. I had absolutely no idea that you kind of worked in like corporate IT before I think you just assumed that all these people have just like, they left school and they were like, right, straight to the garden borders. Yeah. And obviously, I think you think that with like small business owners like myself, that they probably had a bit of a switch at one time. But no, I had no idea about that. It's amazing. So
I didn't have this hair back then, because I probably wouldn't have got through the job interviews. But and that's sort of the reason why I mentioned like the Mohican, is that gardening has allowed me to sort of be who I was before I got into corporate world. Is like kind of a free thinker, dance to the beat of my own drum. And now I can do that in my own business, and it's not a negative. And actually, I can be myself. Clients love it. I think. I like it, and it's just about being relaxed and free, because life is hard enough, let alone having to squish yourself into a certain shape or form.
And I think within the garden, I think within kind of the design world as well, it's even more kind of maybe even expected a little bit that you might have like be a little bit more kind of colourful in clothing or hairstyle, or I think it fits perfectly with like the design kind of world. So how much time do you spend on kind of your own business? Is it like, do you do like 2-3 days a week, or are you like 9 till 5, or what's your schedule look like? I guess because when you're filming and you do YouTube, that's kind of that section. But what's the actual business? How much time you spend on that?
And that's what's quite sort of tricky when you're self-employed, especially with what I call like sort of a mixed portfolio career. So for me, it's like I'm a garden designer first and foremost. That's bread and butter. So that's like the biggest chunk of my work is always design based. And then we've got things like the Garden Rescue, the TV show, and that films for so many months of the summer and a little bit of the winter with the prep and stuff. And then we've got like the YouTube and the content. I would say that sort of at least 60% of my work is design. Yeah. And then a big chunk of it in the summer is wrapped up in Garden Rescue, which is still design. And then the rest of my time, probably 20-30%, is either writing content, writing paid for articles for magazines, engaging with my audience through the online forum I've got, out in my own garden as well. So all that's got to get squished in somewhere.
Do you do everything on your own garden as well? I kind of expected you would have like, just with you not being home quite so much and stuff. And I kind of expected you would. But
gonna be honest, up until last summer, I did it all on my own. It's 1.5 acres. When I moved here, bought the house, it was just a paddock. So I created this concept garden. I did it pretty much all with my own 2 hands, designed it, dug it up, sorted it out, got some landscaping, like very light touch landscaping materials in, because it's rural. And then I got to sort of early last year and thought, oh my God, like I'm literally spending 2 or 3 hours a day when I get from work, reading, cutting my grass, cutting my hedges, and it just got too much. So I'll be honest, I've got a gardener throughout the year that does what I class as the stuff that, whether I do it or not, it doesn't matter. So lawns, hedges, edges.
Yeah.
I cut a mean hedge, but so does a good gardener. So there's no point me spending 3 hours a week trimming hedges when I could be doing other work. And I can employ someone to do that because I can best use my time somewhere else. So I still do all of the pruning. I still love the propagation of plants, obviously all the design, but the stuff that someone else can do, at the moment I'm outsourcing that because, as you've pointed out, there's not enough hours in the day, and I don't want to be the busy fool that gets totally frazzled and falls out of love with this passion I've got because I've just completely worn myself out.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I built a business on saving people time, and a lot of my customers like to do the fun stuff and the stuff that they want to do, and I come and I do exactly that: the lawns, the hedges. Obviously, do a lot of other stuff as well, but 2-3 days a week, I'm saving people's weekends. I like to think so. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same thing. So, in terms of, obviously, you talked about the night courses and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of people out there that are similar to me. They probably run small businesses and do like local gardening, board attending, stuff like that, that probably are quite interested in the design element. What would you advise that somebody that's got a kind of a desire to do that? Where would you think they should start in your opinion to maybe boost the knowledge, or what advice would you give?
That's a really good question. I probably get about 2 or 3 contacts, like emails or messages a month from people saying I'm thinking of becoming a designer, or I'm a landscaper, but I'm leaning more towards the design. I don't know where to start. And my advice is always the same, no matter who comes to me with that question, which is, go and do like a short course. So the RHS do like a couple of days design just to give you a flavour. There's loads of garden design schools that will do like a full day, like mini taster of of an overview of garden design, and see how that feels. If you like it and it sets your world on fire, then you can move on to maybe doing a short course or a part-time course. What I would never say to someone is go and do a degree, put your work on hold, get a load of debt, remortgage your house, because it's too much of a gamble. Because garden design, it's my profession, I love it, but most of the time you're going to be self-employed unless you work for a big consultancy.
Yeah.
Work comes, work goes, it's hard graft. So rather than putting all your eggs in one basket, go and learn a little bit. There's some brilliant online courses as well. So like my approach was, I had limited time, I was doing it all on weekends or night school, and I just did the bits I needed to know, soaked in as much as I could. And then as soon as I got the knowledge, it's like, I need to put it into practice. So for landscapers or people new to design, ask your mates, can you redesign that flower bed for them? And get them to just to pay the cost of it. So however much your plants cost or whatever, buy you some beers, and use all your friends and family who have lower expectations because it's basically free work that they couldn't do.
Yeah.
Like, really sort of test yourself down and learn all your mistakes, because it's far easier with a friend or someone that isn't expecting fireworks because they know that you're starting off, rather than going out there and trying to win business and charge people, and it can feel overwhelming. So, go and do those short courses, read as much as you can online, books, YouTube tutorials, and start to put it into practice. And you'll find your own sort of flavour with it as well, because garden design is a huge discipline, and you can look at it and go, oh my God, how am I going to learn all those styles? And the truth of it is you won't. You'll learn what works for your clientele and your skill set. So you might decide that you love formal gardens and you like terracing. So that might become your little niche skill. You're probably not going to turn around and say, I also want to design hectares of naturalistic landscapes. They're too different. So you your preference will inform your design style. And so coming back to the question, for new people wanting to design, take those baby steps, find out what you like, and find some people that want that service, that are willing for you to go in and have a go and make mistakes, family and friends. And then that's how you can also build your portfolio, because you'll have these examples of work you can show people, and some good testimonials and people that are patient with you. And that's the way to go, really. Don't jump in head first. Get a taster for it, speak to people, ask other designers. One of the big lessons I had starting the business was, after I'd won that competition, did a show garden, fabulous, great. And then I was like, well, what's next? So I got in touch with a number of other leading designers who were doing show gardens the next year, and I volunteered to go and plant for them, clean plants, brush the floor, whatever. And I went there and did that at a number of show gardens to learn of other designers' styles, the way they plant, because it's also varied. And I would literally pay for myself to go there, put myself up in a hotel or Airbnb. And in some cases, I'd just be cleaning ferns for 3 days solid, but watching that designer, watching those plant experts arrange them. Other designers are a bit more hands-on. They'd be like, right, here's your section. What I want is A, B, and C. If I don't like it, I'll redo it, but this is what I want. And that gives you a bit of pressure to go, well, I really want to impress you and show you that I understand and I'm listening. So I did that for about 2 years, and it really helps understand what I'm good at, and also sort of soak up the information from other people. And it's no pressure to them. You're doing it for free, which I know sounds painful, but sometimes you have to do that. And that's, from my perspective, a really good way to get knowledge without sitting in night schools for the rest of your life or signing up for 3-year degrees.
100%. I think because obviously this is predominantly aimed at gardeners and people with garden businesses, and I think we can jump in quite quickly to additional services, and it's very much not an additional service, because as I'm sure you agree, it's about quality with this, and kind of the deeper you can go with it, the better the results are going to be. Whereas if you add another service, let's say, I don't know, pressure washing, for example, into your gardening business, there's only the equipment does a lot of the work for you. You need to know a few things, but ultimately you could probably add that, and you could probably be as good as anybody else within about 3 months after a little bit of practice. But yeah, I guess going kind of really narrow and deep and focusing on qualities, you're only going to pay off for you. What would you say was the kind of your favourite design that you've ever done? Have you done anything like really that really stands out? Because I did like a massive job last year, and it's kind of the one that, if we're getting deeper into conversation, I always kind of go back to, oh, we did this project, it took blah 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 blah. Have you got anything that kind of like sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. There's one sort of a more recent one. It's I love it when a client gets in touch, they inquire about design, you have a chat with them, and you know, I want to get that connection with all my clients, because I don't want to design for people who, you know, we just don't gel, or they're expecting something that isn't my service, or you get a feel for people. And there was a couple that commissioned me probably about 2 years ago now, and they had this house that just looked out over fields, which looked gorgeous. But next to the house is this massive main road. It's dead noisy. There's, you know, all sorts of restrictions on the land of what we can and can't do. But what was beautiful is they basically said, we've seen your show gardens, we love what you do. We like these couple of plants, but other than that, go for it. We've not got a set idea. So I designed this sort of really naturalistic garden with some real key like materials that linked in with the house. It was a converted barn, and so it was like all the materials were really stripped back, but it was the plants, and it was about sort of pulling that view in, shielding the road noise, and going to town with like incredible plants that are quite rare and unusual, because I knew they were bought into it. They wanted a garden, so I'm like, well, I'm going to give you a garden that you can't help yourself from going out and pruning and fiddling about with it. And by the time it was finished, and you know, I loved it. I thought it looked nice. The gardener that was helping me, that took it over, got back in touch a year later and said, God, what are these plants? I've never seen them. And so I've kept in touch with him, and it's kind of evolved, and it's great to see he's learning about new plants. The client loves it because it blends into the distance. And so everyone that I worked with was really bought in. So by the time we delivered it to them, they knew what they were getting, they were enthused about it, and they had something that was unique. So they're like the perfect client, whereas sort of the not as perfect client is someone that comes to me, and I used to do it, but I don't anymore, where they almost like instruct to design. So they'd had an idea, fine. They had a theme, fine. And then they sort of sketched it up and went, well, I want you to design me that. And when I first started out, they're like, okay, well, I'll sort of fix this from a design point of view, because it's not quite design, it doesn't quite work. But now if someone does that, I say, oh, that's great, but you don't need my services. Like if you've got that design, you just need a landscaper. Like I don't get involved, because it robs me of my skill, and it also means that they already think they know what they want. And if it doesn't work, then it falls back on me, even though it wasn't really my design. So it's about letting the designer design, really listening to the client, and having that kind of like two-way chat with them to make sure that everyone's as enthused as everyone else. And if they're not, something's going wrong. Like if the landscape is looking a bit puzzled or like looking a bit ambivalent, then something's wrong, because he or she should be as enthused about the design as I am, the client. Because if we're all working together correctly and we know it's all doable, then it should be a nice project to do, rather than, you know, people dragging their feet or looking a bit confused.
Yeah, you obviously you must have quite a big network of people that because you don't do any of the physical work in the business.
And that was one of my first conscious decisions, because a lot of designers that I started out with would sort of bring in landscapers and contract them, and they got the business off the ground far faster than I did. They got a lot more portfolio work, but the stress levels, the fact they were VAT registered within a year because of the amount of money going to the books, and it was stress, and they just looked frazzled. And I set off from the get-go, knowing that I didn't want to do that. I don't want a big team. I've only got me. You know, I employ myself. I pay myself. I pay my contractors, but it's me. Like, I don't manage a team. So I started out with that vision that I would do design. I would hand off to a contract landscaper. You know, I build a network and recommend people, but it was never through Garden Ninja. There's a clear line between design, landscape, that design, sort that out, and then I come back in for planting. because they're the two bits I love. The hard landscaping is not my skill set. I understand it, but I'm not a landscaper. So I'm not going to get involved and start giving instruction with landscapers, just like I don't like it when landscapers start trying to rejig my design to make those pavers fit without cuts. Do you know? It's it's like knowing your skill set, and that is my skill set. I design with those cuts in mind, but it's about sort of separating out your skills and not trying to jump in as the master controller spinning all the plates. You know?
Yeah, I got told off by a garden designer once for doing that, so I do apologise. I do apologise on behalf of all of us. It didn't fit though, and I really tried. So I guess it's because it's really important. Kind of, I'm a massive advocate of building a big network of people, just from a from a consistency point of view, a reputation point of view, and an efficiency as well. So how do you work with like a few different landscapes? Obviously you've got quite big projects, and our availability can just shrink to almost nothing in high season, especially. Do you work with like several different people, or recommend several?
I have kind of a pool of sort of landscapers or specialists that work in different areas, like a stonemason. If I'm designing something that's really like stone heavy, fussy, intricate, it's like definitely his world. Whereas if it's just, say, pardon the pun, banging down porcelain pavers, then I know these other 4 or 5 landscapers, that's their bread and butter. So it's about picking who. But because I don't physically contract them, I will say to the client, here's, I don't know, I only ever give 2 options because 3 is too much, but here's 2 people to look at, and then go and get your own 3 quotes. So you've got 5. So the client always usually has like 5 quotes to sort of peg off against each other. And because they're spending the money, they've got to have that confidence that they're picking the right people. And although I'm confident from the work I do with these people, I can't tell the client, that you're definitely going to get on with them, or you definitely, they need to make that decision. And that's the bit that I learned early on, because having done a couple of like collaborative landscaping pieces where I'm there on site project managing it, which I did twice, which I'm a great project manager, but I'm not a landscaper. So, and it gets tricky. So I just decided that's not something I'm going to jump into. I can talk about the design, but I'm not going to be there on site managing, buns on seats, 20 bags of soil arriving. It's too far away from design.
It's headspace as well, that you don't need to be occupied with that type of thing. So no, I totally get that.
Yeah. And I chat with this pool, this team, sort of different teams, about what their availability is like, and I book my work up quite far in advance, so that helps as well. And like my clients will wait 6 months, 8 months for the right landscaper versus who's available. And I'm really clear with them. I say, if someone comes to quote and they're ready, next Monday, you've got to question that, because all the good landscapers will have a pipeline. And unless work's fallen out somewhere, but even so, they won't be able to get those materials in 5 working days. So they're prepped knowing that it's not going to happen within 6 weeks. It's a year, 2-year project from start to finish. And then I think that helps them buy into it as well, because as much as I love, my work on TV, sometimes like instant makeovers can give the impression that there are teams of landscapers with, a carpenter, a stonemason.
I have thought that before, actually.
Ready in a white van to jump out and start fitting and slamming in gardens in 2-3 days, and it's not. But obviously, TV has to work to like a story in a limited time frame.
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah,
it's just about setting expectations with clients, and
So what is?
It makes sense.
What is your favourite thing that you're doing? So like the TV, the YouTube, the blogs. What's your favourite currently?
So my favourite thing, and it might not answer you directly, but my favourite thing is being able to pass over knowledge to any form of gardener, whether they're brand new, intermediate, expert, guru. If I've got some knowledge that's going to help someone, so like, one of my skills is unusual pruning techniques. So, I write a lot about that. But if someone's reading it and then they message me and say, I've just pruned me 40-year-old apple tree back to, a really good position, then that brings me a great sense of joy. So, and with the garden rescue stuff, the bits to camera, from my point of view, you'll note that I'm always saying, here's this plant, this is why I've chosen it, this is why it's going here, this is why it's brilliant for these conditions. If you want X, Y, and Z, this is for you. If you've not got this, you want this. And it's all about kind of like, get the knowledge out of my brain and share it, because there's been this fear in all industries that if you have a skill, you should hold on to it and like keep it locked away and feed it out just when you need to. But with gardening, it's a huge subject matter. There's loads of interested people, but we can't all expect them to go on courses, sign up for degrees, buy loads of books. You know, not a lot of people have all that time and money to do that. So for me, with my business, it's about, I've got one life and I want to share my knowledge. So my favourite bits are, YouTube, sharing knowledge, garden rescue, sharing knowledge. Even when I'm designing for clients, it's like, if I can get their permission to do a quick video as to why I've designed that the way I have and why it fits and why that's better than the alternative version, then I will do it, because it brings me a buzz to know that it's accessible for people and I'm not losing out because of it. And I think a lot of people sometimes think if you share all your knowledge, you're giving it away for free. It's like, but I've got plenty of work, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. If I want to share my knowledge, you don't have to take it. I'm not going to ram it down your throat, but it's there, accessible for people to get them into gardening. And that's my sort of mission statement, is if you want to learn to garden, then come and see my blog, and all of a sudden, by the weekend, you'll have something that you feel confident that you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I watched one of your videos to remind myself the best ways to do bare root planting, because it's not something I do very often. And if we get to winter and I haven't really had any kind of, inquiries for it, a whole year goes past without me doing it. And it is that, you're right, so it is those little tidbits. So for me, it was a good reminder about the soaking process. Yes. And to be honest, I'd have probably forgotten that, because it doesn't take very long in terms of time. And for those that don't know, it was just basically filling up a bucket of water, getting them absolutely drenched and soaking, so they're ready to go in with all the nutrients. But I'd completely forgotten that. And I don't know how many hedgerow it had taken me before I remembered that they needed to be wet when they went in. But no, it is those little things, because even on Garden Rescue, they're the bits of, although it's like a half an hour show and the 22 minutes of it is entertainment, there is those little bits that they're the value bits, really. Outside of the entertainment. When
Garden Rescue approached me to sort of join, I was really clear. It's like, I enjoy the show, it's really good fun, there's loads of great design tips, but you've got to let me give my tips. It can't just be me waxing lyrical about a certain rose and how gorgeous it is. It's like, I need to be able to explain why. And along the way, if I can throw in why we graft roses, why if you take a cutting, you're going to end up with a different size. Yeah. If I can throw that in a couple of, within a minute, then not only do you know that rose is gorgeous, but you know that you need to check what rootstock it's on, and you should plant it in winter because they're cheaper, they establish quicker. I'm all about ramming in as many tips so that people succeed, because if I try and help a load of new gardeners to either design or plant, and I'm kind of holding back on the information, when they try it, they may fail. If they fail, then they're like, either Lee's a rubbish gardener or I'm a crap gardener. And I don't want either of those to be true. So it's I want to help them. And that's where all the work really comes from. Is I love design. I could do it all day long, but I also like helping other people learn how to garden. Put that into good use.
No, that's awesome. So how did the whole Garden Rescue thing come about? Obviously, you were on YouTube first, and obviously had your business. And you said they approached you, and so how did that that must have been a bit of an odd. Because you don't kind of expect that to just come walking along, really, do you?
I had a few missed phone calls from this guy at a production company, and I'd had a few before, and they kind of gone nowhere. So I was a bit well, we'll have a chat and see what happens. So it was all very kind of, who knows. I was chatting away, and then they asked for some examples of my work, which I sent off in bits and bobs. Then it all went quiet, as it usually does. I thought no more about it, and then got a phone call just before the pandemic struck, offering me a number of episodes, and I was like, oh gosh, okay, yes, let's do that. That sounds fun. Then COVID hit. We still managed to film, but it was all obviously with the COVID protocol. So I probably started at the worst time because everything was so difficult. But yeah, it just kind of, it kind of came out of nowhere. And I thought, well, this is a great way to reach another audience, show what I can do and have a bit of fun. And it just kind of took off. And now, 4 years down the line, still doing it. Each year managing to kind of like fit more design stuff into it as the series gets more established and stuff. So
had you met like Charlie and the other designers previously?
No.
Or is that like a day one, hi Charlie type thing?
The evening before the first filming day. So obviously we overnight the night before the first day, and then the night after we do 2 a week, so 2 different gardens in a similar area. And then the build team, they start on day 1, and me and say Charlie or Chris or Flo go in day 2. And so laying paving usually happens on day 1. Stuff that takes at least a day to set go off.
Yeah.
And then it all comes together in that day 2. So I'd met like Charlie the night before, the same when Chris and Flo joined. I think it was like the year or 2 afterwards. And then you'd literally just thrown in together, and there's no scripts, the time's ticking, you have to finish obviously. And it's kind of like real landscape design, but on the fly as it happens. So, you're kind of having to move around the garden depending on who's doing what to get out the way and make sure that you're not holding up something that needs to happen, or, footings are going in, or there's a pergola going up or whatever. You're kind of moving around consistently whilst trying to explain the design, think of content that's useful, that links the design to the client, to the audience, to the aspect, to the soil conditions. So for me, it's like, it's a good buzz of constantly thinking about, well, okay, I moved from there now because I can't do that. Oh, that bit's really interesting, and this is the reason why, and how am I going to frame that for someone so it makes sense?
Yeah.
Because it's easy as like landscapers or designers to talk about something as if we're talking to other landscapes.
Yeah.
But we're not talking to like brand spanking new, fresh out the box gardeners that, if I speak Latin to them, they're just like, what do you mean? So it's about sort of translating it into conversational gardening that's neither patronising nor too simplistic. You don't want to, dumb it down so much that it's, it upsets people. So it's about finding that balance with the clock ticking, whilst everything's moving around you. And
sounds like quite a difficult time.
Yeah, I think it's a very, blow my own trumpet, I think it's a unique skill set to do that like 2 days a week throughout the summer, having designed like months previously, and to navigate around, people, the weather as well. But I think if you're a good designer, horticulturalist, landscaper, and you know your stuff, which like everyone on that team does, when someone puts a camera at you and says, right, we need you to talk about this, because you know it, and maybe this is just me, but it's kind of, you've already got the information, and it's just about explaining it. It's not, you're not reading off a script, you're not being fed lines like, say this. It's very much like, well, what would I say to a client if they came out and said, oh, what's going on here? And then I would explain it to them. And that's the way the show's kind of built. And that's the bit that I think a lot of people struggle to get their heads around is, well, how do you do that? That sounds like a right stress. But I suppose the presenters have been picked based on that skill set to be able to look at something for 30 seconds and then go, right, I've got you 2 minutes for camera now. So off we go. Yeah.
Yeah, they've not opened the bonnet of like a Nissan Micra and said, name the you're actually, you're all. And I mean, like Charlie's been around since like the 90s. I remember watching it on TV when we were a kid. And was it Ground Force, wasn't it? Like many years ago. So I guess that experience must be quite helpful for you to kind of like, because there'll be no figuring it out, will it? 20 odd years and stuff. So that must be quite nice for you to.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, she's absolutely lovely. And I remember watching her as a child, and I love to wind her up whenever she gets a little bit like stressed or whatnot. And I'll say, "Oh, I remember watching you when I was 6," and it really annoys her. And she gets annoyed and throws stuff at me. We've got like quite a fun relationship in that she is, you know, like a bookworm based on plants. Like plants are her thing.
Yeah.
And she worked in a nursery originally. She loves, you know, ponds and water features. And it's nice sharing the knowledge because she knows all about that. And then I'm obviously heavily design and much more focused on sort of wildlife and trying to keep things as native as possible in terms of plants. It's better for the environment. So I like to think we've got quite a nice balance between, you know, the wise old sage and then me that's sort of coming in trying to shake things up a little bit. But it's great fun. I love doing it. So.
Because you need like a really like a kind of well-known name if you're going to go that, like originally when the show kind of started, just to draw an audience in at first, and then it's kind of like come for the name and stay for the stay for the content. What type of things do you see on a like on a kind of consistent basis that you see are like common pitfalls that people do when they're doing their own designing, maybe like a garden that's been asked to plant up a border? Do you see any like common themes that are just like, you know, make you as an expert just kind of want to go, but like you see regularly?
Yeah, and don't worry, I'll frame it with encouragement because I'm always about encouragement. But the things that, especially with landscapers and sort of like contract gardeners, laying plants out in lines. It's like plants don't grow in rows, but for some reason, and I think it's just the human nature, if you give someone 10, I don't know, shrubs, most people just will line them up in a row, bang them in equally so they're like soldiers, right, I've planted them. But when you look at them, you go, well, that's going to grow to 2 meters wide. That's a tiddler. And they're all in a row, and you've got this border with them all in the middle, shoved at the back. And it's really about spacing things out and being a bit more relaxed in your placement of plants to make them look more natural, because unless someone said to you, I want a really unnatural looking garden with loads of rows of plants awkwardly lined up, then just move things around a bit and look on that label, because even if you don't know that plant off the top of your head, you've bought it from, you know, a wholesaler, or if you ended up down B&Q, but it will have a label on saying how big it grows, the conditions it likes. So that's like your cheat card if you don't really know, to say, okay, well, I've got it in a shady corner under the eaves of that building. Well, it's not going to grow there, so let's switch that out for something that doesn't mind shade. And then let's stagger it a bit, give it a bit of flow, you know, just play around with it, because digging them in is quick, but you know, a couple of minutes just moving them around and seeing like, does it feel balanced or is it a bit too like robotic? So like the layout of plants always bugs me. And then secondly, it's like its dimensions, and like flower bed dimensions are so key to making a garden feel bigger than it is, to make it feel balanced, nested, comfortable. And people tend to squeeze the borders into like this 50 centimetre run, or like, you know, this big. So everything has to line up because there's no space. And you've got a massive lawn in the middle, a huge patio, and there's only 2 people that live there. And it's like if the designer and landscaper and client had really spoken, you'd say, do you really need a patio for 12 people? Like, even if you have 12 people around in the middle of summer, what's wrong with having like chairs that can spill onto the lawn? Let's get those borders big. Let's get some trees in, some height, some interest. Make the garden feel like you are looking out onto just your own garden, not other people's, not fences. Let's pull it in so that you feel like you're secluded, you know, it's your space, versus huge lawn, huge patio, plinky plonky plants dotted around, paint the fence panels grey. Another pet hate, because all of a sudden you're just boxing it in and making it really obvious that you've just done a bit of this, done a bit of that. And everyone's garden then starts at the same, because people have a habit of copying and going, well, they've done it, so it must be like this. And then you end up with these like 3 different layouts of plinky plonky plants, as I call them, and patios, and, you know, lots of grey everywhere. But that's fine if you like grey, but bring in some green, because if not, it starts to look a bit like, you know, a prison, you know, prison court, grey and brutal. So yeah, bigger borders. Don't line your plants up like they're in a row, and look at those labels. Do you know, they're like your cheat cards if you don't really know what to do with it, and that'll help navigate where you put them, and your clients will be happier, and it'll look nicer.
The planting stuff in a row, I guess just I was thinking about it while you were talking, and I guess it's fairly, you can see where somebody's mind would go. We've got a 12-meter long border, it's 50 centimeters long. I've got 8 plants. That's it's kind of maths first, isn't it? And then I can totally see how somebody would, just thinking about my own house when I first moved in, it's exactly that. It's a perfectly square garden in a new build, and there was one row running all along the left hand side, and they're all in a line, but they're all the same distance apart. I've obviously moved it and done stuff, but I can totally get why people would do that.
It's the case of you don't know what you don't know either. So I'm saying this,
people
do this. It's only because I've got like an expertise in this and know that just never looks right. So, you know, and it can all be undone. It's like those plants can be moved. People tend to think once they're in, well, you can still move them up to a certain point. And just being a bit more relaxed with your proportions, like you don't need this huge football pitch of a lawn. Like you just don't. End up mowing it gets muddy. You're mowing about it. Like, let's go for more plants because it will feel much nicer.
I when I very first started looking at kind of like not garden design by any means, but just like spending more time in the garden, working in it, and just like having a little think about what we can do, and you know, and trying to figure out why people have put stuff in different places. I used to use the because I used to work in retail for many years, and they have something called rivers, trees, and mountains, which is basically about heights. And I couldn't get my mind out of that kind of swooping level, which I guess does have some merit, but obviously it's not kind of, it's a very, very loose design principle. It's more about catching people's eyes with prices. But it was, it's just a real strange thing that I guess that was my kind of planted things in a row at all equal distances.
And I think what else is important is if from like a landscaper's perspective, if you know you've got good clients and you've got plenty of work and you're wanting to really improve your plant A game, why not get in touch with a local designer or someone you know and say, you know, how much would you charge for a planting plant, or would you come in at the end of this landscaping project and work with me for a day, and whether you source the plants or they do, and all of a sudden you will learn a lot more about plants and positioning. It helps connect you with garden designers. They get a bit of work, and the client at the end of it is left with like a really nice garden rather than just a nice garden. And going back to my original point, like I don't do landscaping, but I have a pool of people that I will work with. And for you, if you've not got the time or the inclination to go out and learn all about plants and horticulture, bring someone in for that chunk of the work that does, and then you can network with them, and all of a sudden you don't have to go and learn 10 winter shrubs with evergreen interest, because you can speak to whoever you already know and bring them in for a planting plan or to source them, and like just play to your strengths, especially if you're a new landscaper, you're thinking of going into the business. You don't have to know it all, but you do have to network to find people that do and fill in the gaps until you've either got the knowledge or you've realised I don't need it because I've got these people that can do that.
That's really good advice. One thing I wanted to ask, which I'm quite interested in, is in winter, we're currently recording this in winter, us gardeners go quite quiet.
Yes.
What's it like for you as a designer? Is it the same, or are you working for designs for the summer, or?
I mean, it's not the same for me. And the reason for that is that I get a lot of inquiries in the middle of summer from people going, right, I want my garden doing next week. And I've got this like lovely email that I send back to them that keeps the enthusiasm going, that says, you know, it's a considered process. It's going to be next year. These are the times that I can book you in for, blah, blah, blah. But I tend to backload my work. So I will do most of my design in the winter, very early spring, ready for implementation that summer. And in the summer, Garden Rescue and all the YouTube stuff, there's very few weeks in the summer that I pick up my pencils and start designing. It's pretty much all in the winter. And that was another conscious decision, was that in the summer I can plant, I can do all this stuff. But in the winter, when things quieten down, I need to keep that pipeline. So from year one, it was always a case of trying to book people into the winter, or say, at first I even used to get a discount for winter. That if you can hang on till winter, you'll get X amount off your design, because it's quite. I don't do that now, but I'm trying to sort of show people on this podcast that if you're savvy with those first bits of work, either do them at a discount rate, free, reduce them for times when you're quiet, you can keep that work going, and it's better for you and for the client. But over the winter, I do a lot of design work. I do online consultancy. I write articles now. So over the past sort of 7 or 8 years, it's gone from just design, wait for spring, plant, to other things. So even as a gardener or a landscaper, if you can find other avenues, writing articles is a good one, because there's so many publications that want to know about winter care tips for lawns, when to prune your hedges, what to do if privet's got fireburn or whatever, or it's dropped its leaves. And if you've got some spare time, don't just think you've got to be out, with wet socks on and gloves freezing. There's other routes that you can take, and planning that work in advance, I think, is key.
So you
must have to, in summer, you must have to change hats really quickly, because obviously if you're going into like garden rescue season and you've got all these designs gone out to these landscapers, your phone must be just going mental at the same time as you're filming with like different questions and stuff. And obviously I think it's how do you deal with that? Because I think that's probably a good little bit of advice for our listeners, because we have exactly the same thing. We have our roots, we have our work, but inquiries are coming in, and it's the same. It's kind of very similar. How do you change hats so quickly from being Lee to Lee the presenter?
Yeah, and they are two very different sort of characters, I suppose, in a way. With clients and phone calls, especially in the summer, if I've managed the client's expectations correctly, as in we've had a consultation, I've gone into loads of detail on their needs, their wants, and then mood boards go out, then concept design and final design. By the time I get to the end of it, there's a tech spec for the builder or landscapers, there's my design, there's a planting list, there's all sorts of additional information on like times of year when things are going to flower, when they're not. By the time that gets to the client, there shouldn't really be any loose ends for them to tie up, unless the landscaper says, I can't get this material. And then I go back, if the client rings, and I say, well, what does a landscaper recommend? Because I've given you one spec with a plan B, and if those two aren't available, then he or she needs to match that as close as possible to make the design work. So it may sound a bit like sort of brushing my hands, but I give them that much information that I don't really expect many phone calls, because they're contracting with the landscaper, and it's only if a design thing gets broken or they can't do it, can't get it, that I need to be contactable. So, and I also say to them, like, between the months of like May and September, I'm pretty much not here. So if you get your landscaping done in that time, planting is September, October, November, usually, to get it in ready for next year. You don't really want to be planting in the middle of August either. So it's just about managing them and then making sure that everyone knows what they're doing and not getting overly involved. So if I ended up working with a landscaper that's ringing me every day about, this and that, and it's already in the design and it's in the tech spec, and something's wrong, it's like he or she might need more reassurance, but why is that? So I need to work out, like, should I be working with them? Is something not clear? Like, what's going on? But after so many years now, I very rarely get that, because the people I work with know my work, I know their work. They get all this information, almost too much. So they can then go and build that, liaise with the client, and then I come back in when it's all kind of done and finished.
Yeah.
All the nice bits of planting. But you're right, like the phone used to go nuts. It's sad to say, but I had to take a phone number off my website, obviously being on TV and stuff, and it was just getting a bit nuts. So pretty much everything's through email with me anyway. And I kind of have some time in the morning and a little bit late afternoon where I kind of like triage them and whiz through. If I'm out with garden rescue, there'll be an out of office, so people aren't thinking, why isn't it getting back to me? It's just about kind of making sure everyone knows like where they're up to, and not overcommitting. take on far less work now than I used to because of the other commitments, because I don't want people sat around going, I'm waiting on Lee to plant this. And I wouldn't want to be that client that had a great design but then waited 6 months for me to rock up after TV, like it's just not cool for me. So it's do less better and inform everyone around you much more. Don't just dump them with the design and no details on your paving, the size of that tree, what fence panels. I'm so specific. It's like, here's what the client wants because I've designed it, and here's some alternatives in case those aren't available, or that, for whatever reason the client changes their mind. But other than that, it's then up to you and the client, to sort that out.
Do you drop any kind of like hints that it's one of your designs? Like, someone that knew you really well, could they go, oh, that's a Burkhill design, because you've dropped like a particular plant formation, or like
I think
something that's an indicator?
I know like a designer, and he always says like, oh, I can spot you a mile off, and I joke and say, I joke back and say, I can never spot yours because they're just a bit beige, and like we have this bit of fun, but he always says like, I can just spot like the proportion of planting to hard landscaping, because I am very much plant heavy, and I will try and convince everyone and anyone to plant a bit more and do a little bit less hard landscaping, just because it's better for the environment. We don't want to be paving over everything. We've got issues with drainage and rainwater runoff on a lot of housing estates as it is, and that's kind of like my style. It's like plant heavy and to be really loose with the planting as well. It's not formal at all. It's going to take you on this journey. So I suppose, people that work with me would know that's Lee's. And the fact to hand draw and watercolour them up, which not many people do, it's kind of obvious. It's like, well, there's only a handful of people that seem to do that anymore, and I'm one of them. So I can't just slip like a SketchUp design in with a load of others and pretend it's not mine. It's quite obvious, but that's like another part of the passion for me, is being able to physically use pens and pencils and freehand draw and draw to perspective and then watercolour them. And when the client gets them, it's like they can see the work that's gone into it, and it's a one of a kind. And I think sometimes that, for me anyway, is better because they know the effort that's gone into it, versus if I just print off a SketchUp that's, got loads of filters laid over it. And they've probably seen that on TV 100 times before. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not my style. Like, I'd rather go in all in and be like, this is the design. And if you've got any niggles with it, that's fine. I can redraw it, but I think this is it. Like, I've committed to it. Here's all your tech spec for your builder. Here's your plant list. Here's your plant scheduler. When it's going to flower, boom, boom, boom. Like, boom, off we go. Like, you've got it. There's no doubt about how's it going to look. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that bit does. It's like you get it all. So it's like a full-on ninja.
Yeah. When you're on Garden Rescue and you're going up against one of the other designers, because that's a really strange process. I always think like that's just pretty unique to that situation. Because like, if I was to, I guess, I don't know, write up a quotation, or I won't know who else is bidding for it, what they were talking about. Whereas you've got literally, I know it's not a competitor because it's all fun, but here's what you could have had, and then here's what I produced. Is that like did it hurt a little bit at first when they picked the alternative? Because I guess the other designers you wouldn't see if you went up against another designer in real life.
Yeah, it is quite competitive, like, and it is fun. But obviously, like, as a designer, you want, you look at the client brief, the needs, the wants, the site, the topography, the aspects, blah, blah, blah. And then you come up with like your best idea for that space. So they want all these things, and then you use your creativity and experience to form an idea that you think meets the brief like 110%. That's the way I approach it. So I go in with like, not only do I want to win it, but I want to give you like the best garden for the budget, the space. Yeah. I want you to be surprised. I want to surprise myself with what we can do with that space. So you invest a lot of time into it, but then it is like, well, which one are they going to go with? And sometimes the decision's down to the fact that a designer hids the bins and they hate the bins. They're not actually that bothered about an amazing planting palette or about this really unique thing. They just hate the bins.
Mm-hmm.
But you're designing at speed with briefs that have the details. And yes, sometimes you get some of them that you really want because you think, oh, this is right up my street. If you don't win them, you do feel a little bit. But overall, it's kind of it's a good balance. And I always like to think, well, let's say I win one against like Flo or Chris wins against me or Charlie. At least the viewing public get to see two completely different designs.
100%.
So even if, the client's only one person that gets the garden, but there's another like 1.3 million people that watch each episode that are looking at both that will have a different opinion. They might like that one or that one, and they'll all see different bits. So it's up until the point where it gets built, there's still plenty of content for people to be inspired by or to think I feel like I could do some of that in my garden. So,
the editors do a great job of building suspense on it as well, because they pick out they'll pick out something that they've said in the brief, and then you'll have delivered it on the design, and then they're like, oh, he's captured that bit, and they go, actually, we'll go with the other one. They do it all, they do it all the time, and I get it wrong every single time. So yeah, kudos to the
so do I. Oh, I think I've got this one because I really understand that brief. Yeah, I've got this one, and then you get there and they're like, oh, we just love the colour of that, so we've gone with the other design, and you think, but you just, as a designer presenter, you've just got to get your head around that and realise that, you're using your skills, but there is a 50-50 chance whether it happens or not. So you've got to invest as much as you can to get them the right design. But if it doesn't happen, it's because they're shown two completely separate designs, and you don't know on that day what's most important for them. So it's just about enjoying the design process, even if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, 100%. I do apologise, but we'll edit this out. 1 second. Late night courier services. Thank you very much. Sorry, go on, Mike.
So, one thing that I've noticed is you seem to be all about helping people. So, what I'd quite like to ask you is, what's your advice for somebody who is a gardener, has a small business, and wants to get into, especially in the winter, YouTube, writing like paid columns and bits and pieces like that? What's your advice for getting into that?
My advice would be just to start. So, most people have a website, with things like WordPress and other platforms, it's easy to start a blog. So the best way to prove with writing, for example, that you can write is just to write. Write your own advice articles, get friends to check them, people to proofread them, but put your knowledge out there. Don't write about things you don't know, because it's going to show it's a waste of time. But if you're a new small garden business, you can have a specialism. Maybe it's lawns, maybe it's hedges, trimming, garden clean-outs, whatever. But just start to write about that. And as you start to write, you'll also start to realise just how much you know about a certain subject matter, because as you start, it'll start to flow out. And over time, you'll get better at that. And then for the videos, it's the same thing. If you're starting to write content, and you don't even need to technically publish it, you can just write it, get people to review it, keep it as draft, and that'll build your knowledge. And then you might think, well, I could show someone how to do that. It depends on how far you want to go, but it's just about start. Because if you worry about having to do a creative writing course or a video editing course, you'll never start, because you will, by human nature, put so many things in front of you that you've got to do first that it will feel gargantuan. So it's just about starting small with no risk. Pick some family members that'll be honest but a bit nice. Don't try and get in the Times with your first article and send it off to all these big magazines, because you might just feel a bit battered if they don't reply. So it's start small, start with your knowledge and try and share that, because people need knowledge, people are looking for answers. And if your article, let's say you publish it and someone finds it, they want to know about best time of year to trim hedges, whatever. And then they might look at the hedges and go, oh gosh, well, I've got loads of hedges. I don't think I can do that. But I know, oh, Mike's written that. So I might just give Mike a ring and say, can you give me a quote to do that? So like your content really is about establishing your authority. What do you know? What are your skills? And using it as a like a PR machine really to bring business to you, because you're saying what you can do and showing it, and then you can offer to then go and do it for a price for someone else. So don't be afraid of like just saying what you know and explaining things, because like with that example of the hedge cutting, it's not as if you even have that client to begin with right now. So by writing it and showing what you know, it's not like someone's going to read it and go, I'm going to start a business tomorrow and take all the hedges out of wherever you're based. It doesn't work that way. So it's just about like pushing yourself a bit to get stuff out there and write and take feedback. Some of my first videos, I look at them now and I think, oh God. But then I also look back at them and think, I had an 80 quid Sony camcorder that I got off eBay secondhand. I had no mic. I was gardening on a busy main road in the old house with loads of traffic noise. So I had to wait until the road was quiet, do 30 seconds, the camera stopped, traffic came, the traffic lights came on, cars went past, stop, wait for them to go, right, again. And then put it all together at night on my laptop. And I look back at them now and think, God, I can see all the problems with it. But then I also look and go, oh, you did it. You got around it, you created it, and it just starts to build, just start.
That's cool. It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I look back on my first video and I've nowhere near come as far as you have, and I do go a little bit like, ooh, did I really because it was like I was a little bit nervous and I was like, what am I even doing? Then a student walked past and laughed at me while I was cutting a conifer, and I was like, oh God. It hurts, but it is a learning process. You do get better, and I guess the more you do it, the more you'll learn. So what's next for you? What does this year, 2023 and beyond, look like for you?
I mean, it's like,
hopefully
it's a standard year, but there's garden rescue, there's design, there's my YouTube channel. I started a forum during the latter part of lockdown on my site, so people could ask really specific questions, because what I found was a lot of people were going on my YouTube channel and asking about like specific things that didn't really relate to the video. And it's not the best way to reply. And then it's like, oh, send me an email. And then that gets fussy. But I started the forum so that people could ask them, and then I could answer them. And then anyone else online that typed in that whatever could then find the answers. And that's kind of really taken off. So I think this year I need to get a wiggle on to sort of keep up the reply rate. And also I've got a few sort of new ninjas, expert gardeners, that are answering in tandem with me. So they've sort of joined, shown their experience, and now they're answering questions, and this community's sort of bubbling away. And for this year, I'm excited to see, well, how can that grow? Because that's only ever going to help new intermediate and expert gardeners find information. So for me, it's just about like really looking after my site, because for the past 2 years, my website, I keep on top of it, but it's always like last thing, end of the day, quick, tidy it up, sort that problem out. Whereas this year, it's like I'm going back to where it all started, which was that blog, and really sort of keeping it going and feeding it with more content.
And what's the forum called for anyone that wants to?
So if you visit our blog, gardenninja.co.uk, and then there's a big button at the top saying Gardening Forum. Or if you just Google Gardening Forum, I think I'm number 5 in the world, which is mad, and you'll see it there. There's all different sections. There's some great people on there that will help answer your questions. You can upload pictures. The only condition is if you ask for a garden design, you'll be pushed onto my book me page. It's not a full design service. It's like what is this problem with the plant? Or I've got these options. What do people think? It's collaborative, but it's not in lieu of design or sort of paid for services. It's niggly questions and people that want to ask stuff that they wouldn't ask at a garden centre because they feel a bit silly.
Awesome. We've just hit the hour mark, so we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much for coming on.
Yes.
Really, really appreciate it, and I'm sure the audience will have got a lot of value out of listening to something that's associated to the industry, but not directly involved like you guys are.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And like I said, for anyone that's starting a new business, yes, it's scary. Yes, there's loads of competition. You're not going to know everything, but just start. So be honest with people what you can and can't do. You're learning, you're starting out. and people will give you a lot of leeway if you're just honest with them. You know,
Yeah.
Especially as a new designer, new landscaper, and follow your passion. If you love what you do, keep going. You'll always find a way. You know, people will book and respect valuable people that do a good job. Yeah.
Cool. And if you can't afford to go to night school or whatever at the moment, go straight to Lee's Forum. And, I'm sure there'll be loads of people there, because people love helping people, especially online when they can. Thank you, and we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
You tuned into the Grassroots Gardening Podcast, which is a gardening entertainment show inside the UK where we talk about how it is to run and operate a gardening business. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes it's just us. Either way, we hope to keep you company while you're on your grassroots journey.